There is, of course, a certain logic in the fact that the evangelical revival should have come from within the established church. The Puritan emphasis upon a calling was, as Weber and Tony have shown, particularly well adapted to the experience of prospering and industrious middle class or petty bourgeois groups. The more Lutheran traditions of Anglican Protestantism were less adapted to exclusive doctrines of election, while as the established church it had a peculiar charge over the souls of the poor, indeed, the duty to inculcate in them the virtues of obedience and industry. The lethargy and materialism of the 18th century church were such that, in the end, and against Wesley's wishes, the evangelical revival resulted in the distinct Methodist Church. And yet, Methodism was profoundly marked by its origin. The poor man's descent of Bunyan, of Dan Taylor, and later of the primitive Methodists was a religion of the poor. Orthodox Wesleyanism remained as it had commenced, a religion for the poor. As preachers and evangelists, Whitefield and other early field preachers were more impressive than Wesley, but it was Wesley who was the superlatively energetic and skillful organizer, administrator, and law-giver. He succeeded in combining in exactly the right proportions democracy and discipline, doctrine and emotionalism. His achievement lay not so much in the hysterical revivalist meetings, which were not uncommon in the century of Tyburn, but in the organization of self sustaining Methodist societies in trading and market centers and in mining, weaving, and laboring communities, the democratic participation of whose members in the life of the church was both enlisted and strictly superintended and disciplined. He facilitated entry to these societies by sweeping away all barriers of sectarian doctrines. In order to gain admission, he wrote, Methodists do not impose any opinions whatever. Let them hold particular or general redemption, absolute or conditional decrees. Let them be churchmen or dissenters, Presbyterians or independents. It is no obstacle. The independent or Anabaptist may use his own mode of worship. So may the Quaker, and none will contend with him about it. One condition, and one only, is required, a real desire to save their souls. But once within the Methodist societies, the converted were subjected to a discipline which challenges comparison with the more zealous Calvinist sects. Wesley wished the Methodists to be a peculiar people, to abstain from marriage outside the societies, to be distinguished by their dress and by the gravity of their speech and manners, to avoid the company even of relatives who were still in Satan's kingdom. Members were expelled for levity, for profanity and swearing, for lax attendance at class meetings. The societies, with their confessional band meetings, classes, watch nights, and visiting, made up a lay order within which, as Southey noted, there was a spiritual police, constantly alert for any sign of relapse. The grassroots democracy, by which the societies were officered by tradesmen and working people, extended not at all to matters of doctrine or church government. In nothing did Wesley break more sharply with the traditions of dissent than in his opposition to local autonomy and in the authoritarian rule of himself and of his nominated ministers. And yet it was often in areas with a long descending tradition, Bristol, the West Riding, Manchester, Newcastle, that Methodism made most rapid headway among the poor. In the 1760s, 2 miles from Heckmondwike, where Deacon Priestley and Obadiah were still supporting a church of Calvinist independents, John Nelson, a Bristol stonemason, was already drawing great congregations of clothing workers and miners to hear the new message of personal salvation. On his way to work at the quarry, Nelson would pass the old descending minister's house, exchange texts, and argue the doctrines of sin, redemption by grace, and predestination. Such disputations became more rare in later years as Orthodox Methodist theology became more opportunist, anti intellectual, and otiose. Nelson had been converted while in London when, hearing John Wesley preach in Moorfields. His journal is very different from that of Deacon Priestley. One night I dreamed that I was in Yorkshire, in my working clothes going home, and as I went by Paul Champion's, I heard a mighty cry, as of a multitude of people in distress. All on a sudden they began to scream and tumble over one another. I asked what was the matter, and they told me Satan was let loose among them. Then I thought I saw him in the shape of a red bull running through the people, as a beast runs through the standing corn, yet did not offer to gore any of them, but made directly at me, as if he would run his horns into my heart. Then I cried out, Lord, help me, and immediately caught him by the horns and twisted him on his back, setting my right foot on his neck in the presence of 1,000 people. From this dream he awoke, perspiring and exhausted. On another night, my soul was filled with such a sense of God's love as made me weep before him. I dreamed I was in Yorkshire, going from Gomersall Hilltop to Cleckheaton, and about the middle of the lane I thought I saw Satan coming to meet me in the shape of a tall black man, and the hair of his head like snakes. But I went on, ripped open my clothes, and shewed him my naked breast, saying, See, here is the blood of Christ. Then I thought he fled from me as fast as a hare could run. John Nelson was very much in earnest. He was pressed into the army, refused to serve. He and his wife were mobbed and stoned in their work. But it occurs to one, nevertheless, that Nelson's Satan belongs more to a world of fantasy than Bunyan's Apollyon, for all the latter's fire and scales, and the fantasy has undertones of hysteria and of impaired or frustrated sexuality, which, along with the paroxysms which often accompanied conversion, are among the hallmarks of the Methodist revival, where Bunyan disclosed the challenge of Apollyon in a world of magistrates, backsliders, and worldly excuses for compromise. This Methodist Satan is a disembodied force located somewhere in the psyche, discovered through introspection, or springing forward as a phallic image opposed to the feminine imagery of Christ's love in the gusts of mass hysteria which climaxed revivalist campaigns. From one aspect, this Satan may be seen as an emanation of the misery and despair of the 18th century poor. From another, we may see the energies thwarted of effective outlet in social life and constricted by the life denying tenets of Puritanism, taking a monstrous revenge on the human spirit. We can see Methodism as a mutation of that tradition which reaches back to the 17th century ranters, whose cousins, the Moravians, so deeply influenced Wesley. But the cult of love was brought to a point of poise between the affirmations of social religion and the pathological aberrations of frustrated social and sexual impulses.